Have you ever seen someone die and then pour you coffee years later? That's what made war veteran Caleb Hartman freeze, his heart pounding, eyes locked on the waitress's burned arm, because the tattoo partially hidden beneath those scars wasn't just a mark. It belonged to a fallen unit he once bled with, a unit that lost their combat medic, a woman they mourned as dead, but now she was here, serving food, enduring cruelty in silence, and hiding something far more dangerous than shame. What happened next exposed a twisted chain of arrogance, silence, and a secret campaign for justice that no one saw coming. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for stories that reveal what truly matters. Raina Jefferson had learned to count breaths when the pain started. Not her pain, other people's. The pain they tried to inflict on her with words. The moment Travis Langdon slammed his fist on table 7 and made the silverware jump, she was already at breath 5. She didn't flinch. Not anymore. Look who's here! Freddy Krueger decided to pick up a shift today. He barked, loud enough for the entire diner to freeze. Laughter followed. Thin, brittle laughter from his wingman Elliot Crane, who always lagged 1 second behind like a bad echo. "Hey, monster!" Travis sneered, waving a mug in the air. "How about some more coffee? Try not to melt the cup with those crispy hands." Raina stood at the edge of their booth, holding a half-full pot. Her hands were steady. Not a single drop trembled inside the glass. She wore a clean-pressed uniform, white shirt, long sleeves rolled just to the wrist, black apron tied tight. Her skin, where visible, bore the unmistakable story of old fire, twisted patches of smooth and taut that wove up from her knuckles and disappeared under fabric. "Good morning," she said evenly, pouring into Travis's cup. Black, no sugar. Travis's smile faltered, if only slightly. It always did when she didn't flinch. She remembers. Elliot chuckled. "Got a fireproof memory." Raina moved on to Elliot's mug without a word, then the third man's, then the fourth. 4 regulars. Tuesdays, always the same booth, always the same ritual, public humiliation over pancakes and coffee. Only this Tuesday was different. Across the diner by the window, Caleb Hartman sat still in a corner booth. 42, broad-shouldered, grey, just beginning to touch his close-cropped hair. A duffel bag sat next to him, scuffed from miles of road. He didn't look like much, another road-weary traveler getting a refill before the next stretch. But Caleb wasn't moving, not his fork, not his eyes. They were fixated on Raina, not because of the burns. He'd seen worse in the sandbox. What locked him in place was something else, something that hit him in the gut the moment she turned slightly to pick up a napkin someone had dropped. Her sleeve slipped up just enough for him to see the ink. The top curve of a number, faint now, partly lost in scar tissue, but unmistakable. His coffee went cold in his hand. Caleb stared like he'd seen a ghost, because he had. He knew that tattoo. He'd seen it in a war zone, on a woman who ran through gunfire to pull wounded soldiers out of burning wrecks, who refused to leave the field until every last man was accounted for. She was called KJ. KJ died in Fallujah, or so he'd thought. There was no body, just blood and smoke and silence. But now she was refilling coffee. Travis, oblivious, leaned back and kicked his boots up. "Tell me something, Raina. You fall into a meth lab? Or was it a romantic bonfire gone wrong?" More chuckles. A few heads turned in the diner. No one spoke up. No one ever did. Raina smiled, the kind of smile that made Caleb sit forward. "Neither," she said, "but thank you for your creative theories. That threw Travis. He didn't like resistance wrapped in politeness. You know what I think?" Elliot piped up. "I think she cooked something up in her little ghetto kitchen and kaboom!" Raina's hand didn't tremble. She simply capped the coffee pot. "Enjoy your breakfast, gentlemen." She turned, and as she did, Caleb rose. "Excuse me," he said, stepping toward her. She looked up, caught his eye. He saw it then, not just the tattoo, the stance, shoulders square, weight evenly balanced on both feet, hands relaxed but ready, the way soldiers stand when they're not sure if they're home yet. "Ma'am," he said, low, "where did you serve?" Rayna's eyes narrowed just slightly. "Sir, can I help you with something?" "First Infantry Division," he said. "Big Red One, Fallujah. I had a medic named KJ there. She disappeared during a night raid. Saved 5 guys before the Humvee exploded. The diner noise fell away. Rayna's eyes locked on his. 1 second, 2, then 3. "KJ," he said again, "that was you." Rayna's voice dropped to a whisper. "Have you ever seen someone die and then pour your coffee years later?" Caleb sat down slowly, hands flat on the table. Travis hadn't heard a word of it. He was busy filming a video. "This right here," he said to his phone camera, "is the burnt waitress who serves us at Langdon and Crane Consulting's favorite diner. Check out the crispy skin, boys." Rayna turned. Her voice was steady. "You might want to save that." "For court!" Travis laughed. Elliot laughed louder. Caleb didn't, because he was watching a soldier prepare for battle, and this time the war wasn't in the desert. Rayna didn't speak to Caleb again for the next 20 minutes. Not because she was afraid, but because she was calculating. As she moved through the diner with the same measured grace she had once used in field hospitals under enemy fire, she assessed him, his eyes, his posture, his reaction. He hadn't come to gawk. He hadn't pitied her. He'd recognized her. And that made him dangerous, or useful. Caleb sat in the corner, no longer touching his coffee, watching Travis Langdon record video after video of Rayna as if she were some kind of circus attraction. Elliot Crane kept snorting behind his phone, egging him on. Their other 2 companions, corporate types with glossy shoes and dull eyes, laughed with less enthusiasm now. The mood had shifted, even if they didn't realize it yet. The bell above the door jingled. A family of 5 walked in. Rayna greeted them with a warm smile, guided them to a booth near the window, and handed out menus, all while keeping Travis in the corner of her eye. She caught Caleb watching her again, this time not in recognition but in concern. He knew what she was doing. She was waiting for the right moment. Travis wasn't done. Not by a long shot. "Hey, Rayna," he barked, waving his phone like a remote control. "Come, do that smile again for my followers." She turned slowly. "Sir, I'm working." "Exactly," he grinned. "Work that charm, baby. Or do I have to start tipping based on skin tone?" The comment landed with a thud in the diner's air. Even Elliot's laugh wavered. Rayna walked over, calm. Her fingers were tight on her notepad. "Mr. Langdon," she said, quiet and clear, "if you continue recording me without consent, I'll have to ask you to stop." "You'll have to what?" he barked. "You work here. You don't get to tell me anything." "Actually," Miguel Torres said, appearing behind the counter, "Texas law says otherwise." Travis turned to the manager. "Excuse me? One-party consent for recordings. But harassment? That's a different story." Miguel didn't raise his voice, didn't move from behind the counter, but he had that look. "The one that says I'm not asking twice." Travis scoffed, waved a dismissive hand, and turned back to his phone. "Come on, Rayna. Don't be like that. Just smile for the camera. That's all you're good for anyway." That was when the man in the booth across the aisle choked. It started with a sharp cough, then a hand to the throat. His wife panicked, rising from her seat. The older man staggered, face reddening. Rayna dropped her notepad. In 2 strides she was at his side. "Sir, can you breathe?" she asked, already gauging his airway. He shook his head violently. Her arms slid around his torso. "I'm performing the Heimlich," she announced. 1, 2. The 3rd thrust dislodged a piece of sausage. The man gasped, sagging into the booth. Applause rippled through the diner. Rayna stepped back, checking the man's pulse with 2 fingers on his wrist. "You're okay," she said gently. "Just rest. Breathe slowly." His wife clutched her hand. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Rayna nodded once and stood. Travis had stopped recording. Elliot's phone was down. Even Caleb looked stunned, despite already knowing what she was capable of. Raina turned to Miguel. "I'll comp their meal." He nodded silently. She turned back toward the booth with Travis and Elliot. The expression on her face had changed. The air around her shifted. She wasn't just calm anymore. She was in control. "Gentlemen," she said, voice crisp, "do you still require anything else?" Travis's lips moved, but no words came out. She gave them a thin smile. "Didn't think so." She walked away. Caleb stood and intercepted her near the counter. "That was textbook," he said, "clinical, perfect form." Raina glanced at him. "3 tours, you don't forget." He hesitated, then spoke. "You were KJ, still am," she replied, "though not many know it." "Why didn't you say anything all this time? Would they have listened?" He didn't answer. "Because he knew they wouldn't." "You died," he said finally. "I disappeared. The fire took everything. I had no papers, no proof, just scars." Caleb was silent for a long moment. "Then I saw you run into that smoke. You didn't come back. I thought that I was gone." She looked at him then, really looked. Her eyes were tired but not broken. "Parts of me were." Miguel approached. "Everything okay here?" Raina nodded. "For now." Miguel eyed Caleb. "You're not with them?" "God, no. Good, because I like my floorboards blood-free." Raina almost smiled. Then Travis's voice rang out again. "You know what this place needs? New waitresses, ones without Frankenstein arms." The diner turned. Raina took a breath. "Back to work," she said. Caleb hesitated. "They won't stop." "I know. So what's the play?" She glanced over her shoulder. "You'll see." And with that, she walked straight into the storm, not as a victim, but as the strategist she'd always been. Caleb watched as she took their next order. Calm, controlled, unshakable. And then she smiled, not for them, but for herself, because the campaign had just begun. Travis Langdon didn't like silence, unless he was the one causing it. So when the usual snickers and backup laughs didn't follow his latest jab, he shifted in the booth with a scowl. Elliot Crane tried to lighten the moment with a half-hearted chuckle, but even he could tell something had changed. It wasn't just that Raina Jefferson had silenced the room with a flawless Heimlich save, it was how she stood after, taller, like she'd remembered something the rest of them had forgotten. Power. Caleb Hartman leaned against the counter, his eyes never leaving her. She was moving again, clearing a table near the windows, wiping the surface with rhythmic precision, not robotic, not cold, just deliberate. She hadn't looked at Caleb since their conversation, but he knew she was thinking, calculating, preparing. He'd seen that look once in Mosul, right before a unit medic named KJ disobeyed orders to run into an enemy line and pull out a bleeding sergeant. That same look, except back then it had been under a helmet streaked with blood. "Man," Travis muttered, louder now, trying to recapture the room. "They'll let anyone wear a uniform now, huh? Even kitchen burns can be medals these days." He was testing her. Miguel Torres from behind the counter stiffened. A regular named Dory, early 60s, sharp-eyed, always sat at the corner table, lowered her fork slowly and stared at Travis. Raina didn't answer. She finished the table, nodded at the family with kids, and turned toward the kitchen. As she walked by Caleb, her hand brushed the edge of the counter. Not by accident. "Meet me out back. 10 minutes. She didn't stop walking. Caleb stood, grabbed his duffel, and left some cash on the table. The alley behind Ray's diner was cramped, shadowed by 2 cracked brick walls and a rusted dumpster. But it was quiet. A little wind cut between the buildings. Caleb stood with his arms crossed, back to the wall. Raina emerged a moment later, tying her apron in a knot, her sleeves pushed up now. The scars on her arms caught the sunlight, so did the tattoo. "You still remember the unit code," Caleb said. "Muscle memory, it's still there." "Part of you, all of me," she said, "just buried." They stood in silence for a beat. "I thought you were dead. I was supposed to be." He nodded slowly. I never forgot you. After Fallujah, we heard you didn't make it out. Nobody, no contact. That was intentional. I didn't want to be found. Why? Raina looked away. They gave me a new name at the field hospital. No ID survived the explosion. I couldn't talk for weeks. Third-degree burns, memory gaps. They listed me as Jane Doe until the VA system processed me months later, and by then I was just another faceless vet in rehab with no discharge file, no rank, no records, just invisible. Caleb's jaw clenched. You could have reached out. To whom do you think they'd believe me? No proof, no benefits. The only thing I had was this. She tapped the tattoo, and it doesn't scan anymore. Caleb stepped forward. You ran into a hot zone to save 6 men. 3 of them lived. You were a hero before the scars. You're still one now. Heroes don't serve coffee to the people who mock them. Maybe not. But soldiers do worse when the war comes home. Raina nodded slowly. So why are you here, Caleb? Really, I came for coffee. I stayed because of you, and because those bastards in there don't know who they're messing with. She studied him. You still serve? Retired 2 years ago. I was contracting for a while. Now I run support programs for vets who've been discarded. Like you, I'm not discarded, just misfiled. Same damn thing. Raina sighed. You think this is winnable? You've been fighting for 6 months, gathering intel, recording them. How did you? I watched you. You look at them the way you looked at terrain maps. I know a recon mind when I see it. Raina chuckled, the sound rare and dry. Langdon and Crane Consulting, Tuesdays, same booth, always talking shop, without filters. They think I'm too dumb or too broken to understand, but I have every word saved, and now I have a witness. 2, Caleb said. I'm with you. She tilted her head. Why? Because when I thought you were gone, I thought I'd lost one of the bravest people I've ever known. Turns out you're still here, and still fighting. Then you should know this isn't a battlefield. It's an ambush. I don't want to start shooting unless I know I'll win. You already are. She shook her head. No, I'm gathering, planning. One wrong move, and I become the angry black woman who couldn't take a joke. They win, so we don't let them twist it. We document, we expose. She looked at him with a new sharpness. You said you run support programs. How many contacts do you have in veteran advocacy? Civil rights lawyers, press outlets? Enough. And one journalist owes me a favor. Raina crossed her arms. Good, because I need this to go nuclear when it breaks. Not a spark, a detonation. Then let's load the warhead. Back inside the diner, the mood had shifted. Not that Travis noticed. He was busy bragging to Elliot about some new contract he'd landed. Stevens called this morning, Travis was saying. Biggest client we've got. Said we're greenlit to start phase 2. Payroll restructuring. You know what that means? Elliot grinned. More creative firings? Exactly. And fewer lawsuits this time. I learned from the Jenkins mess. Don't say race, say cultural mismatch. Poor synergy, productivity gaps. Raina stood 2 tables away, jotting a fake order. Her phone in her apron pocket was already recording. Caleb watched from the counter, nodding slightly to himself. Raina walked by and made brief eye contact. The tiniest nod passed between them. That night, after closing, she uploaded the recordings to a secure drive. Voice files, video snippets, transcript drafts. She labeled them by topic: retaliation, harassment, discriminatory intent, illegal dismissal tactics, client names, slurs. Caleb helped her write the executive summary. They drafted a timeline, connected the dots. Then Raina clicked send. 5 copies to 5 inboxes, a civil rights attorney, a veterans union contact, an anonymous whistleblower portal, a journalist, a non-profit watchdog. Then she turned off the screen and looked at Caleb. Now we wait. He smiled. I'm guessing not too long. She raised an eyebrow. That journalist I told you about, she's on her way. The next Tuesday would not go as planned for Langdon and Crane. Not even close. But Raina would be ready. Tuesday came dressed in sunlight and silence. Raina Jefferson woke early. She always did on Tuesdays now, not out of dread, but preparation. War was never about rage. It was about timing. She tied her apron the way a soldier ties armor, reviewed her steps like pre-op routines, checked the recorder in her apron pocket twice. The files were backed up to a cloud drive. External storage, too. Caleb had triple-checked every contingency. He'd sent the story packet to the journalist that morning. Her name was Lena Marquez. Independent, fierce. She didn't work for clicks. She worked for truth. Caleb had saved her once during a joint op in Syria. She never forgot. Today she was coming in. As a customer, Raina stepped into Ray's diner like she always did, quietly, confidently, with just a hint of fire beneath the surface. Langdon and Crane's crew was already there. Travis was in rare form.
"There she is, the Tuesday monster!"
Elliot laughed. One of the junior execs raised a hand to high-five him and immediately thought better of it. Raina said nothing. She simply began her routine. Coffee, water, orders. The diner was fuller than usual. Regulars had brought friends. Miguel raised an eyebrow at her across the counter. She nodded subtly. Caleb sat in his usual booth. At 9:18 a.m., Lena Marquez walked in. No camera crew, just a notebook, a phone in her hand, and quiet steel in her eyes. She looked like a tourist passing through until you met her gaze. Then you realized she missed nothing. She took a seat near the front, ordered black coffee, and opened her notebook. Raina poured it. Their eyes met. No words. Just that silent nod passed between warriors who knew what time it was. Travis was halfway through a rant about workplace loyalty when Raina walked over to refill. "You know," he said loudly, "some people just aren't company material. You can smell it on them." "Like the coffee?" she replied, pouring his cup. "Exactly. Burnt and bitter." He smirked. Raina smiled. "Tell me more about your company. Sounds fascinating." Elliot leaned in, eyes lighting up. "You'd love it, Rainey. We streamline, help companies clean house, get rid of legacy problems. Define legacy," she said, wiping the edge of the table. "You know, people who don't fit, who slows things down, the ones who always cry victim." Travis chuckled. "I mean, look around. Would you hire someone like that in a front-facing role? Someone like, you know what I mean." "Unfortunately," Raina replied. "Voice even, I do." Across the diner, Lena was recording at 10:03. Travis received a call. "Mitchell," he said, standing. "Excuse me, boys, big client." He stepped outside. Raina casually followed to the counter. Caleb joined her. "He's about to get the first shock." "Journalist or lawyer?" "Journalist." She published an open letter, went live 3 minutes ago. Video clips, audio samples, full names, company policies. And the headline, "Veteran Waitress Records Discriminatory Practices at Langdon and Crane, 6 months of proof." Raina almost smiled. Outside, Travis's voice was rising. "What do you mean by under review?" "Darren, we've been your consultant for 2 years. Pause. What Instagram post?" Pause. "That's fake. That's edited. It's a prank." Pause. Then louder. "She's just a waitress." Inside, phones started buzzing. One of the junior execs looked down and paled. "Guys, we're tagged in something." Elliot grabbed his phone. His jaw went slack. "She posted it. The whole thing. She outed us." "Not just us," someone muttered. "All the client names are in there. Contracts, quotes." Raina walked back to the table. "Gentlemen, can I get you anything else? Perhaps some humility?" Nobody laughed. Miguel appeared beside her. "You need backup? They're already surrounded." He looked around the room. Phones were up. Whispers were building. Even the cooks in the kitchen were watching through the order window. Travis stormed back in. "You think this is funny? You want to ruin people's lives?" Raina faced him calmly. "No, Mr. Langdon. I want to stop people from ruining others. You're just some burnt-out veteran," Caleb cut in, standing. "She's a decorated combat medic. 3 tours, Bronze Star. and more moral courage than you'll ever understand. You're all insane, Travis hissed. This is slander. Libel. Lena stood, finally. Mr. Langdon, it's evidence. My name is Lena Marquez. You may want to retain a lawyer. The color drained from his face. We'll sue. We'll bury you. Raina tilted her head. You'll try, but unlike your business model, the truth scales fast. Caleb stepped forward, and now the Department of Labor has it too. The diner erupted, not in noise but in attention. Every eye is on Travis. Every phone camera was turned on. He fled. Raina exhaled. War's not over, Caleb said. No, she agreed, but we just won the first battle. Lena walked up and extended her hand. Sergeant Jefferson, thank you for your service and your silence. It just became the loudest thing online. Raina shook her hand, firm, clean. The room didn't cheer, it respected. Outside, Travis's phone kept ringing, but the world had shifted, and Raina Jefferson had finally stopped counting breaths, because justice had learned her name. Raina Jefferson didn't feel triumphant, not yet. The viral moment was just that, a moment. Real change was slower, harder, and far more dangerous. Caleb Hartman knew it too. That's why he stayed close. Watching the door, watching the windows, watching the shifting expressions on the faces of Langdon and Crane's entourage, who now sat like shamed students after a public reprimand. But shame didn't last. Pride had longer legs, and Raina understood predators best when they were wounded. That's when they lashed out. Tuesday afternoon brought quiet. Travis Langdon was gone. Elliot Crane lingered, pretending to drink his coffee, eyes darting around, fingers twitching on his phone. They always leave someone behind, Raina murmured to Caleb while wiping down a counter. Scouting damage, he agreed. Miguel Torres leaned in from the kitchen pass. Police came by. Someone reported an altercation here. False claim. Sounded anonymous. Langdon's doing, Caleb muttered. Think he'll escalate? Miguel asked. Raina didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her eyes said yes. At 4:15, a black SUV pulled up outside Ray's diner. Two men in grey suits stepped out. Professional, calm, the kind of calm that came with law degrees and hidden threats. They entered the diner without urgency. One flashed a badge from the State Department of Labor. The other remained silent. Raina Jefferson? The first asked. She stepped forward. Yes, we're conducting a preliminary inquiry regarding your reports. May we speak with you privately? Miguel offered the office. They entered. Caleb followed, uninvited. I'm her legal witness, he said flatly. The men didn't argue. Inside, Raina produced her files, time-stamped, verified, archived. The senior agent reviewed the documents silently, brows rising occasionally. You understand, he said after a while, this information is sufficient to open a federal investigation. That's the point, Raina replied. Once that begins, you'll be exposed. Retaliation is common. Already started. We'll assign protection if necessary. It won't be. The agent looked at Caleb. You agree with her plan? She's not the one with a plan. Langdon is, and I'd rather stay ahead of it. That night, Raina's story aired on 3 national outlets. Lena's footage was everywhere. A 5-minute clip played on loop online. The moment Raina stood up to Travis the rescue, she performed the final standoff. Caleb's voice calling her a decorated combat medic echoed through the living room. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag veteran waitress. Hashtag justice served. Hashtag scars of service support poured in. So did threats. By midnight, Raina's inbox had 200 messages. Most were kind. A few were not. One had a picture of her face photoshopped over a target symbol. She didn't flinch. She forwarded it to the agent. Looks like we'll take that protection detail, Caleb said grimly. Wednesday morning, Ray's diner was packed, not with regulars but with veterans. Dozens. Some came alone, others in wheelchairs, others with prosthetic arms. many in faded jackets, patches worn soft from time and pride. They didn't speak loudly, they didn't chant, they just sat, ordered coffee, watched Raina. When she poured for one, he looked up and said softly, "You carried us out, I never forgot." She blinked fast but nodded. "Glad you made it home." He tapped his cane twice on the floor in salute. By noon, a reporter from a national morning show arrived. She interviewed customers in line. A woman held up a handmade sign, "Scars are stories too." Caleb and Raina stayed out of the camera shots. Let others speak. Let the truth echo from more mouths than theirs. Langdon's spiral wasn't silent either. That afternoon his name trended again, but this time it was for leaked audio from another whistleblower. A former intern posted emails revealing Langdon's directive to streamline urban representation using coded language to fire people of color. Sponsors pulled funding. Clients dropped contracts. Langdon and Crane's stock nosedived. The board issued a statement, "We are initiating a full internal review." But it was too late. Thursday, Caleb received a text. "Incoming. He's back in town, not alone." He showed Raina. "What's the play?" he asked. She tightened her apron. "Same as always. We don't blink." That evening, Travis Langdon returned to the diner, not with lawyers, with a camera crew. He pushed open the door with the arrogance of a man who'd once owned the air in a room. "I'm here to clear my name," he declared. "Fake news has gone too far." Raina stood behind the counter. Caleb stepped into his path. "You're not welcome here. This is public access, private property." Travis turned to the cameras. "You see this? Silencing a citizen. Cancel culture runs amok." She lied, staged it all, burn scars for sympathy. The diner fell into icy silence. One of the veterans stood up. "I watched her pull a soldier out of a burning Humvee. Her arm caught fire. She didn't stop." Travis turned. Another stood, then another. Each spoke, each remembered, until 12 men and women had stood, each confirming who Raina was, what she'd done. Langdon's face twisted. The cameras kept rolling. Raina stepped forward finally. "I didn't burn myself for sympathy. I earned every scar-saving men who thought their lives were over. You built a company on fear and discrimination. And now? You're afraid of a waitress." She turned to the cameras. "That tells the real story." Langdon fled again, and this time no one followed. Raina Jefferson stepped into the back room of Ray's diner, stripped off her apron, and let herself breathe for the first time all day. Her hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from release, the kind that came after holding the line for too long. Out front, Caleb Hartman was closing the blinds, ushering the last of the veterans out through the side door. They'd stayed late, cleaning, clearing tables, fixing a leaky faucet. One had brought a box of nails and quietly reinforced the front door frame. They knew a storm wasn't over just because the thunder stopped. Miguel came in with 2 mugs of coffee. He handed one to Raina without a word. "You holding up?" Caleb asked. Raina took a sip. "My feet hurt, my ears are ringing, I can't feel my left shoulder, but yes." Miguel sat down. "We had news crews camped outside this morning. I had to shoo one off the roof." "It's not about me anymore," Raina said. "It's about what I represent. That scares them more." "Good," Caleb muttered. "Let it." The door opened again. Lena Marquez stepped in, carrying a tablet and wearing the same pressed blazer she'd worn on national TV that morning. "Raina," she said by way of greeting. "Hope you weren't planning to sleep tonight." Raina smirked. "Not in the last few weeks." Lena set the tablet on the table and tapped it. The screen lit up with a chart, timelines, social media trends, a map of viral spread. "You're international now. Picked up in 6 languages. The footage of Langdon being shouted down by 12 veterans has been viewed 8.2 million times." Caleb gave a low whistle. "Comment sections are 90% positive," Lena added. "The rest are bots." Miguel nodded toward Raina. "She won't say it, but she's exhausted." She can be exhausted later, Lena said. Right now, we have an opportunity. For what? Raina asked. To turn this into something more than a takedown. To build, I'm not a movement. No, Lena agreed. You're the spark. The rest comes after. Raina leaned back. The idea of doing more, being more, it tugged at old parts of her. The parts that hadn't died in Iraq. The parts that had gone quiet after the explosion. What would that look like? She asked finally. Veteran advocacy, Lena said. Policy change, workplace reform, corporate accountability. You can speak where others have been silenced, and people will listen. Raina looked at Caleb. You in? He didn't hesitate. Always. That weekend, Raina and Caleb met with a local non-profit that helped veterans reintegrate into civilian life. They gave testimony, told their story to a boardroom of policymakers. Cameras were rolling, but for once, Raina didn't feel like she was being watched. She felt heard. One woman wept openly. Another passed Raina a note after, "My brother didn't make it home, but if he had, I'd want him to meet you." The next Tuesday at Ray's Diner, Travis Langdon did not return. But his lawyer did. She entered alone, professionally dressed, carrying a cease and desist letter. For defamation, she explained. Miguel took the envelope without expression. You'll need to serve that properly, Caleb said from a nearby booth. And it won't stick. Truth is the best defense. My client wishes to resolve this quietly. Raina stepped out from the back. Your client tried to destroy lives publicly, and now he wants silence in return? The lawyer's eyes flicked to the cameras. She hadn't realized they were rolling again. You're being recorded. For everyone's protection, Caleb said. The lawyer left without another word. Later that evening, a new face appeared. Not media, not a lawyer, just a man in his 50s, military haircut, uniform coat folded neatly over his arm. He waited until the dinner rush passed. Then Raina approached. Sergeant Jefferson? She looked up. He offered his hand. Colonel Avery Mason, retired. You treated me in Ramadi. I was unconscious. Never got to thank you. She shook his hand slowly. You're welcome. He stepped back and saluted. The Pentagon is watching. So is the Department of Veterans Affairs. If you ever want to speak to them, say the word. Raina didn't know what to say, so she said what mattered most. I will. When I'm ready. Outside the diner, the night air was cool. Caleb and Raina sat on the back steps, watching the quiet street. You did it, Caleb said. Not yet. Then what's this? Raina looked out at the lights in the distance, at the quiet strength of those who stood with her. This, she said, is just the beginning. By Tuesday morning, Ray's Diner had become something else. The hand-painted sign above the door still read the same, but everything underneath it had shifted. Customers came not just for eggs and coffee, but to leave letters, speak thanks, and in some cases, confess. One man in a suit approached the counter, eyes downcast. He'd heckled Raina once, months ago, called her a name he regretted the moment it left his mouth. She served him coffee then. She served him coffee now. No grudge, no smile, just dignity. He left a 50 on the counter and walked out without another word. Inside the kitchen, Miguel was flipping pancakes when Caleb walked in carrying a stack of printed emails. 4 more testimonies came in overnight, he said, former employees of Langdon and Crane. All confirmed the same tactics, profiling, coded language, forced resignations. Miguel flipped a pancake. Do we send them to Lena? Already did. She's building a public case now. Documented, cross-referenced. Miguel glanced at the clock. And what time does our villain usually rise from the crypt? Langdon? Depends. If he hasn't been disbarred by karma yet, probably by noon. At 11:37 a.m., a white envelope was slipped through the front door. Miguel opened it. Inside was a printed flyer, a fake news article headlined "Veteran Fraud Caught in Media Hoax," with a photoshopped image of Raina being arrested, completely false. Langdon's panicking, Caleb said. Smear campaign. Pathetic, Miguel muttered. Rayner read it once and dropped it into the trash. That's the best he's got? He's grasping, Caleb said. But that's when people do the most damage. That afternoon, Rayner and Caleb drove to a nearby university. They were invited to speak at a student veterans group. The room was packed, young faces, haunted eyes, hopeful questions. Rayner told the story plainly. No theatrics, just the truth. She explained what it was like to go from a war zone to a break room, from saving lives to being invisible. Caleb added his own chapter, how silence becomes a strategy for survival. When it was over, a Marine in the back stood up. How did you not lose yourself when no one saw you anymore? Rayner paused. I did, for a while, but then someone did see me again. And I remembered who I was. That night the segment aired. From battlefield to break room, the hidden war of veterans in civilian life. Clips of Rayner serving coffee, clips of her speaking calmly to hateful men, voiceovers of veterans praising her name. Langdon tried to counter, released a press statement calling the whole situation an unfortunate misunderstanding blown out of proportion. The internet tore it apart. Rayner didn't respond publicly. She didn't have to, but the threats didn't stop. A rock shattered one of the diner's front windows just before closing. No one was hurt. The rock had a note tied to it, "Scars don't make you a hero." Miguel boarded it up that night with plywood. Caleb installed a camera. 2, actually. Rayner swept the glass without a word. The next morning, a young woman arrived with her toddler. She handed Rayner a handmade card. Crayon scribbles read, "You are strong like Wonder Woman." Rayner knelt, took the card with both hands and said, "Thank you. That means more than you know." Later that day, news broke. Langdon and Crane had lost another major contract. A tech giant pulled out of a multi-million-dollar deal. Their board issued a second statement, more contrite this time. An internal investigation was now formally underway. Langdon's personal accounts went dark. Elliot Crane resigned. Rayner got the news while wiping down tables. She didn't celebrate. "It's not about watching them fall," she told Caleb. "It's about making sure no one else goes through what we did." He nodded. Justice isn't vengeance, it's prevention. By Friday, Ray's Diner had a new wall. Miguel built it himself, cedar panels on the far end of the dining room, polished and warm. Above it, he mounted a plaque, the honor wall. Veterans started bringing in photos, some of themselves. Some of my friends didn't make it home. Rayner hung one too, an old snapshot of her unit. Before the scars, before the fire, before the silence. Below it she placed a caption, "Not gone, not forgotten, just waiting to be seen again." People came just to look at the wall, and they left changed. Monday morning started with the sound of hammers. The front window of Ray's Diner had been replaced, not just with glass, but reinforced polycarbonate, courtesy of a local contractor who refused payment after seeing Rayner's story on the news. He brought his teenage daughter along to help, saying, "She needs to see people like you." Rayner had thanked him quietly. She was learning to accept gratitude without flinching. The week ahead felt different, not lighter, not easier, but aligned. The backlash hadn't stopped. If anything, the threats had gotten more creative. Fake Yelp reviews. Anonymous mail. One letter was scrawled in marker on torn cardboard. "Heroes don't cry behind counters." Rayner didn't cry. She read it once, then handed it to Caleb. "Add it to the folder." He did. By noon, Lena Marquez was back, this time with a film crew. "Docu-series," she said as she unpacked gear. 3 parts. Your story, the system, and what comes next. Rayner wasn't eager to be in front of the camera again, but she trusted Lena. Lena asked better questions than most people thought to answer. They started filming near the honor wall. Miguel cleared out the afternoon tables. The regulars stayed respectfully quiet. Even the fry cook stopped whistling. "What changed the moment the story went public?" Lena asked. Raina didn't answer right away. She studied the photos on the wall. Old friends, familiar eyes, frozen moments, everything and nothing, she said finally. People looked at me differently, but I didn't change. I was just revealed. Revealed as what? As someone worth listening to. Outside, a man in a grey sedan snapped photos of the diner. He didn't come in, just drove slowly past twice. Caleb took a photo of the license plate. "You think it's Langdon's people?" Miguel asked. "Wouldn't put it past him." "Let him come back," Raina said. "Let him walk through that door again. But this time, Dee'd better bring the truth." Tuesday arrived with storm clouds, thick and low. The diner stayed busy despite the weather. A group of retired nurses took up the back corner booth. They brought flowers and left notes. "We see you. Thank you for holding the line." At 10:32, a courier arrived with a letter from a federal office, the Department of Veterans Affairs. Raina opened it at the counter. Caleb leaned in as she scanned. "What's it say?" "They want me to testify." He raised an eyebrow. "Where?" "Senate Subcommittee, Workplace Discrimination Against Veterans." Caleb grinned. "That's your next battlefield." She folded the letter. "Then we plan the mission." That night, Travis Langdon posted a video. Shaky lighting, a dark office. He looked tired, unshaven, with none of his usual bravado. "This is to set the record straight," he began. "I was wrong. I let a toxic culture fester under my watch. I hurt people. I mocked a woman who gave more to this country than I ever did. And if I could take it back, I would." He paused, swallowed hard. "But since I can't, I'm stepping down from Langdon and Crane, effective immediately, and I'm donating my shares to a foundation supporting veteran reintegration." The video spread fast. The responses were mixed. Some called it redemption, others a PR stunt. Raina didn't comment, but when she watched it, her face softened slightly. "That was real," Caleb said beside her. "Parts of it still matters. Maybe." She looked out the diner window at the same booth where Travis used to sit. It was empty now, but the air around it no longer felt poisoned. Thursday brought another surprise. A group of students from a local high school entered the diner with handmade signs. "Thank you, Miss Raina. Your scars are beautiful. Real heroes serve on all fronts." One student presented her with a folder, an assignment the class had completed. Each student had written an essay about someone in their life who showed invisible courage. Many wrote about her. Raina read the first one, then the second. By the third, she had to excuse herself to the back room. She let herself cry, not in pain, in honor. That night, Lena recorded a final interview segment. "If you could tell your younger self one thing back when you thought you were lost forever, what would it be?" Raina took a long breath. "I'd say, your scars don't make you less, they make you undeniable. Cut." Lena smiled. "That's the closing line." Raina nodded. "It was never just mine. It belongs to everyone who stayed standing." Outside, the storm clouds broke at last. Rain fell steadily on the roof, but inside, Ray's diner glowed warm. And the war had become something else, a legacy. By Friday morning, the diner had become more than just a gathering spot. It was now a symbol. Local newspapers called it the quiet epicenter of a national reckoning. Veterans from other states started showing up, not to take selfies or seek attention, but to sit at the counter, shake Raina Jefferson's hand, and leave behind pieces of their own stories. Old dog tags, folded letters. One man brought a photo of his squad, taped to a canteen he'd carried through Fallujah. Raina never asked for these things, but she received each with reverence. Miguel cleared out a display case. They started calling it the archive. Caleb Hartman helped document each item, photographing and labeling them. "This isn't a shrine," he said. "It's a ledger of unseen sacrifice." Raina nodded. "And unfinished stories." That afternoon she received another letter, this time from the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, hand-signed. It acknowledged her upcoming testimony and thanked her for redefining public perception of military service and its aftermath. She tucked it into the archive. Between a Bronze Star citation and a crumpled field map, Langdon's resignation triggered a chain reaction. 6 executives at Langdon and Crane stepped down within 48 hours. The company's board voted to dissolve the consultancy entirely by the end of the quarter. Several civil rights firms began reaching out to former employees, offering class action support. Rayna didn't say much publicly, but one night, as she was closing up with Caleb, she whispered, "It doesn't feel like a win." He understood. Because it's not about making them lose, it's about us being seen. Saturday brought unexpected guests. A military chaplain in uniform stood quietly by the honor wall. When Rayna approached, he spoke without turning. "You don't know me, but I've read every report about you, the field records, the unit testimonials, the testimonies from the N you carried back. I buried 2 of them. They spoke your name with their last breath." Rayna stood silent. He turned to her. "You were never lost, only hidden." He left a folded note beneath her photo. Inside was a single line, "No greater love than to lay down one's life. You tried, you still do." Later that day, a different kind of visitor arrived. A young woman, early 20s, with long sleeves and nervous eyes. She waited until the crowd thinned, then approached Rayna as she refilled napkin holders. "I read about you. I'm not a veteran, but I've got these—" She pulled up her sleeves. "Scars, not from fire, but pain all the same." Rayna didn't flinch. She didn't ask. She simply said, "You survived. That's your ribbon." The woman blinked fast, then whispered, "Thank you." By evening, the diner was full again. Lena returned with an editor to finalize the docuseries. Local musicians offered to play live music every Sunday. Even the mayor stopped by. "Not for a photo op," he insisted, "but to say this city's better because of you." Miguel served him coffee without ceremony. Rayna just nodded. "Make it better for the next one." That night, as the sun set over Ray's diner, Rayna walked outside and sat on the curb. Caleb joined her with 2 mugs. "One for every 100 conversations you've had this week," he joked, handing one over. She smiled faintly. "You think it lasts?" "What? Change, respect, justice." Caleb didn't rush the answer. "If we hold the line, if we stay visible, then yes, but only if people like you keep showing up." She sipped the coffee. "Then I'll show up every day. As long as it takes." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of brewed coffee and cedar wood from the honor wall, and though the night crept in quietly, there was nothing quiet about what Rayna had built. It was loud in the ways that mattered. Undeniable. Like her scars, like her strength, the halls of Capitol Hill were colder than Rayna Jefferson expected, not just in temperature, but in tone. Marble walls and political calculation echoed in the same breath, but she walked them with a steady stride. Combat boots beneath pressed slacks, her blazer sharp and unfussy. Caleb Hartman walked beside her, carrying a slim case that held the documentation Lena Marquez had helped assemble. Videos, testimonies, transcripts. Proof, not sentiment. Rayna didn't need to dress her truth. She only needed to deliver it. They passed veterans in suits. Some nodded, some simply stared. One man whispered, "You're her." She nodded back but didn't break stride. The Senate Subcommittee on Veterans Affairs had invited her to testify, not out of kindness but necessity. Her story had tipped something over, a national conversation they couldn't ignore anymore. Inside the hearing chamber, cameras were already mounted. A nameplate read, "Sergeant Rayna Jefferson, Ret." She read it once, then sat. The panel was composed of 7 members, 4 men, 3 women. Mixture of parties, mixture of intentions. Some leaned in with open interest, others with folded arms and skepticism. "Sergeant Jefferson," the chair began, "we appreciate your presence today. You've received quite a bit of attention in the last few weeks." Raina nodded. I didn't ask for it. I just stopped hiding. The chair allowed a small smile. We'd like to understand what happened. In your words. She breathed once, then began. I served 3 tours as a combat trauma specialist in Iraq. I carried men from burning vehicles. I patched wounds while bullets flew overhead. I made peace with dying many times, but nothing prepared me for coming home. She paused, scanning the faces, because when I did, I was invisible. I was a waitress. I was a body with scars people pretended not to see, until they mocked them, until they mocked me. A few people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. They called me names, filmed me, laughed. I said nothing, because that's what we're trained to do, endure. But 6 months ago, I began recording. Every Tuesday, every insult, every confession. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I realized the silence wasn't protecting anyone but them. She opened the folder, slid forward a transcript. This is a verbatim record of senior executives describing how to fire veterans and people of color without legal consequence. Coded language, performance traps, culture excuses. One senator, an older woman with silver hair and sharp glasses, leaned forward. How did they respond when you exposed them? They tried to destroy me. Social media campaigns, legal threats, surveillance, physical intimidation. And how did you respond? I kept serving, and I kept recording. Caleb sat in the row behind her, unmoving. Lena was nearby, notebook in hand, capturing everything. Another senator, more skeptical, tapped his pen. Do you think this is systemic or isolated to your case? Raina didn't flinch. If it were isolated, you wouldn't be holding this hearing. A murmur rippled through the room. The chair nodded. Fair point. Raina continued. I am not the story. I am a symptom. You want to fix the system? Start by believing us. Start by seeing us. Not when we're in uniform, but especially when we're not. The silence that followed was thick. Then do you believe corporate reform is enough? Only if it's enforced, only if you give people like me legal ground to stand on, not just applause. The chair leaned back. Thank you, Sergeant Jefferson. We'll enter your documents into the record. Raina stood. So did Caleb. As she walked out, a staffer handed her a small pin, the Senate Veteran Advocate Medal. Informal, symbolic, but real. She held it in her hand for a long moment, then pocketed it. Outside, a crowd had gathered. Reporters, advocates, strangers. Some clapped, some saluted. Raina didn't wave, but she nodded. Lena met her on the steps. You made history. I told the truth. Same thing. They descended slowly. Caleb's phone buzzed. He checked the screen. Langdon just posted again. Raina didn't stop walking. Let him. I have nothing left to say to him. This time he's not talking to you. He's talking to other execs. Warning them. Saying what happened to him could happen to them. Raina stopped. Fear can be useful. Caleb nodded, especially if it keeps them from repeating it. They reached the car. She looked back once at the Capitol, not in awe, but as if measuring how far she'd come. Later that afternoon, Raina Jefferson returned to Ray's Diner not as a waitress, but as someone who had just addressed the United States Senate. The bell above the door still jingled the same way. The smell of coffee still lingered in the air. Miguel looked up from the register and gave a nod. No big words, no fanfare, just acknowledgement. And that was enough. The regulars stood and clapped. Not for a show, just for her. Raina gave a small wave and slipped behind the counter. The uniform was gone today, replaced by simple slacks and a button-down shirt. But the sleeves were rolled up, scars visible. No one looked away. Caleb came in a few minutes later, setting his briefcase down and loosening his tie. He took his usual seat at the bar. You realize you trended above the State of the Union address, he said casually. Raina smirked. Don't tempt me with power. Too late. Across the country, news outlets were dissecting her testimony. Clips from her hearing were replayed with commentary. Social media is flooded with quotes. One in particular had caught fire. Start by believing us, especially when we're not in uniform. It became a rallying cry. Veterans began using it as a hashtag to share their own experiences. A few were heartbreaking, some were defiant, most were unheard until now. That evening, Raina received a call. Private number. Unknown. She answered, "Ms. Jefferson, this is Brigadier General Louise Merrick. I've been asked to formally invite you to participate in a national task force on veteran reintegration and workplace equity. You'll be compensated, but more importantly, empowered. We'd like your voice at the table." Raina blinked. "Why me?" "Because we've all been talking about this problem for years. You showed us what it looks like when it's ignored. And what can it become when it's answered?" Raina didn't reply immediately. "Then, I accept." Miguel hosted a small dinner that night. No media, no speeches. Just the diner crew, a few veterans, Lena, Caleb and Raina. The honor wall glowed beneath string lights. Someone brought a guitar. They sang old road songs. Caleb told a story that made everyone laugh until they cried. Then Raina stood, holding her glass of lemonade. "I never wanted to be anyone's example, just someone who didn't disappear. But you all made it possible to stay visible. And now, maybe we can make it easier for the next person." She raised her glass. "To stay seen." Everyone raised theirs. "To stay seen." 3 days later, Langdon and Crane officially dissolved. The company's final press release acknowledged failures, accepted responsibility, and pledged to support the incoming veteran initiative Raina would be helping lead. Some said it was damage control. Others called it a full circle. Raina just called it overdue. The following week, Raina flew to Chicago to meet with non-profit leaders and federal coordinators. The agenda was dense: legislation drafts, policy proposals, and outreach strategies. But the room listened when she spoke. Because she didn't speak like a politician, she spoke like someone who had bled through the silence. A young congressional aide approached her after, "I've been working on veteran bills for 2 years, but today you made me see them." Raina thanked her, then told her to fight harder. Meanwhile, back at the diner, Caleb and Miguel kept things running. A man came in asking about Raina. When told she was away for advocacy work, he said, "Good, she's needed." Then left an envelope. Inside was a check. No name, just a note for the one she's still carrying. When Raina returned, a banner had been quietly hung above the honor wall. It read, "Legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's what you make visible." She stood in front of it for a long time. No words, just the steady presence of someone who now knew her value would never again be measured by silence. Fall came slowly to the city, brushing the streets with gold and rust. At Ray's diner, the change in season brought warm pies, stronger coffee, and a quiet steadiness that echoed the rhythm of healing. Raina Jefferson stood outside the diner one morning, watching leaves swirl in the breeze. She wore her old jacket now, not to hide her scars, but because the wind reminded her of early patrol mornings in Iraq. Different battlefield, same alertness. Inside, Caleb Hartman sat at the counter reading a new article from The Atlantic. A full feature, the veteran who changed the conversation. Raina's photo took up the entire top half of the page, scars visible, eyes steady. Miguel slid a fresh batch of cornbread into the oven. Business had never been better, but he still refused to raise prices. "Some people need to afford dignity," he said. That morning, a young man walked in with a limp and an old camo jacket. He looked around, hesitant, then spotted the honor wall. Raina met him halfway. "First time here?" He nodded. "I heard this was the place, the one that listens." She gestured toward the counter. "Sit, we've got coffee and quiet, both strong." By afternoon, a school bus stopped out front. A teacher and 10 students entered. They were writing a group paper on modern heroism. Raina answered their questions kindly, but kept the focus on everyone whose photo hung behind her. "I'm not the whole story," she told them, "just a chapter. One student raised her hand. Do you ever wish you'd stayed invisible? Raina paused. Sometimes it was safer, but it was lonelier too. That evening Caleb met her out back. You got the message? She nodded. He's coming by. Alone? I told him it was the only way. At 7:14 p.m. Travis Langdon walked through the door. He wore no suit, no camera crew, just an old blazer and a tired look. Raina didn't move from behind the counter. He approached slowly. I'm not here to redeem myself, he said, or ask for forgiveness. I came because there are things I need to say out loud. Raina nodded. Then say them. He looked around. At the honor wall, at the tables filled with families, veterans and strangers who were no longer strangers. I spent most of my life believing power was something you owned, controlled, distributed. I used it like a weapon. Raina crossed her arms, and when you lost it, I realized I never had any, not the kind that matters. Silence stretched. Then he pulled a folded paper from his jacket and placed it on the counter. This is my full statement. I've signed over personal funds, half my estate, to veteran mental health programs, not for PR, just because I finally understand the cost of what I ignored. Raina stared at it but didn't touch it. And what do you want from me? He shook his head. Nothing. I just didn't want the last word between us to be yours alone. Raina looked him in the eye. It still is. He nodded once, then turned and walked out. No cameras followed, only the weight of his own undoing. Later that night, Raina sat outside under the stars. Lena joined her. Final episode goes live tomorrow. Are you ready for 1 million people to hear the full arc? Raina smiled faintly. They've heard the storm. Let them hear the silence too. Lena raised a brow. Have you ever thought of writing a book? About what? About what happens when the war doesn't end, it just changes shape. Raina considered that, maybe. But first I want to keep showing up. That's the real ending. Not applause, just presence. The next morning, the diner opened to find a small crowd outside. Not press, just people, waiting, some with notes, others with coffee for the crew, a few with folded flags. Inside, the honor wall had no more space, so Miguel cleared another section, built a second one. Legacy continued. Raina stepped behind the counter, poured the first cup, and another chapter began. By early winter, snow had begun to flirt with the edges of the city, dusting the sidewalks in thin layers like powdered memory. The wind pressed against the windows of Ray's diner, but inside the warmth remained. A hearth lit not by fire, but by people. Raina Jefferson stood in the back kitchen, staring at a small, worn photo. It had been delivered in a plain envelope with no return address. In it, a younger version of herself knelt beside a wounded soldier in the desert, his name written in faded ink on the back, J. Wright. She held the photo in silence for a long time, then she placed it carefully in a new frame, walked to the honor wall, and pinned it beneath a small brass plate, fallen but found. That day, the diner held a small gathering. No media, no stage, just a tribute for veterans returning from recent deployments. Lena recorded snippets for the docuseries but stayed discreet. It was Raina's idea to give each vet a seat at the table with no fanfare. Sometimes, she had said, coming home means being able to sit down without explaining who you are. James Wright arrived late, not because he intended to, but because he had taken the long road from the train station. When he stepped inside, Raina looked up and froze. He wasn't a ghost, but he wasn't unchanged either. His posture was still military, but his eyes, those had carried new burdens. He walked up to her and without a word handed her a patch, the big red one. Her breath caught. You kept it. He nodded. You saved me. I've spent a decade thinking you didn't make it, and then I walked into this diner months ago and saw you standing there. I couldn't breathe. Raina blinked. Why didn't you say something? Because I wasn't ready. And because I wanted to see what you'd built, before I remembered you only by what we'd lost. They sat in silence for a moment. The past did not demand words, only recognition. Then she smiled softly. "We never did finish that chess game in Ballard." "You were losing," James said. "You wish." They laughed. That night, the documentary aired its final episode. It was called The Weight We Carry. It didn't open with Raina's scars or courtroom moments. It opened with her pouring coffee, serving, listening, and only then did it tell the audience who she really was. The response was seismic. Donations flooded in for the veteran reintegration program. Schools called to book Raina as a speaker. Employers asked for training sessions, lawmakers requested meetings, but Raina remained where she was, at the diner where change felt real. One morning, a little girl came in holding her mother's hand. She pointed to the honor wall. "That lady looks like a superhero." Her mother knelt beside her. "She is, but not because of what she did in the war, because of what she did after." Raina watched quietly from behind the counter, heart swelling, not with pride, but with peace. By week's end, the city council voted to declare the block where Ray's diner stood as Veterans Row. A small plaque was placed on the sidewalk. Here, a woman turned silence into justice and made scars a source of strength. Miguel wiped a tear when it was unveiled. Caleb simply nodded. And Raina, she read it once, touched the plaque with her fingertips and whispered, "It's not just me, it's us." Letters arrive daily now. Some are from children, some are from aging veterans, some anonymous, all heartfelt. One said, "You reminded me that my story wasn't over." Another, "I showed my daughter your picture. She stopped hiding her burn scars that day." And one simply said, "Thank you for standing still long enough for us to find you." Raina kept them all in a box beneath the counter labeled Proof. As Christmas neared, Lena approached Raina with an idea. "I want to turn the docuseries into a curriculum, something we can take to schools, departments and corporations to teach empathy." Raina looked surprised. "You think they'd listen to that? They listen to you. That's all I need." Raina nodded slowly. "Then let's do it." The following Monday, Caleb stood at the counter holding an envelope. "It's from the White House." Raina raised a brow. "Another medal? Worse, a dinner invitation." She sighed. "Do I have to wear a dress?" Caleb grinned. "Only if you want to give them a heart attack." Raina Jefferson stood in front of the full-length mirror in Lena's apartment, frowning at the dress. It was elegant, navy blue, floor-length and understated, but it wasn't her. Still, the invitation was clear, formal attire required. "You look like someone who should be on a postage stamp," Lena teased from the doorway. Raina rolled her eyes. "You're lucky I didn't show up in boots. You'd start a fashion revolution." Later that night, the historic ballroom of the presidential residence glowed beneath crystal chandeliers. Gold accents shimmered along marble walls. Military leaders, cabinet members, and decorated veterans filled the room. Conversations hummed with rehearsed charm. Raina felt completely out of place until she noticed something. No one there had the calm of someone who'd spent years blending into silence. They were all noise and polish. But Raina carried something rarer, stillness with purpose. A hush fell as the president stepped forward. "Tonight, we honor not just those who served in uniform, but those who continued serving in silence," he said, his voice steady. "We recognize Sergeant Raina Jefferson, whose courage off the battlefield has become a model for national change." Applause broke out. Raina stepped forward, refusing to bow her head or smile politely. She accepted the honor, not as a prize, but as a symbol. And when the cameras flashed, she didn't flinch, because this time she controlled the story. Back home, the diner returned to its usual rhythm. Caleb placed the medal in the front window, not to brag, but as a reminder that greatness didn't always wear stars. Sometimes it wore aprons. Raina poured coffee, wiped counters, listened. One afternoon she found James helping a young man fill out a job application. He just got out, James said quietly. Wants to work. Doesn't know how to say it without sounding broken. Raina smiled. He's not broken, he just speaks a different kind of truth. The curriculum Lena proposed took shape. They named it Scars and Stories. It used real veteran voices to teach empathy, resilience, and awareness. In its pilot session at a local high school, a student asked, "Is it okay if I don't want to join the military but still want to help people who did?" Raina's answer was simple. It's not about the uniform, it's about showing up when it counts. Spring returned. Ray's Diner was now more than a restaurant. It was a sanctuary. A former Navy cook ran the kitchen. A Marine taught weekend writing workshops in the back room. A retired Army nurse offered free mental health screenings every Wednesday. The honor wall became 2 walls, then 3, and still Raina never stopped showing up. One evening she stood out front, watching a group of teens photograph the sidewalk plaque. "You're her," one whispered. Raina nodded. "But so are you, if you want to be..." The final scene of the docuseries was re-released 6 months later as a short film. In it, Raina sat beside James on a bench behind the diner. "Do you think people really change?" James asked. "I think they remember who they were before the world told them to forget. And what if they don't remember?" She looked up at the sky. "Then we remind them." Years later, long after the last episode aired, tourists still came. Some brought letters, others brought silence. All left different. And on the corner of Veterans Row, where Raina once stood invisible, a mural now stretched across the brick. A woman in uniform, scars visible, eyes forward, coffee pot in one hand, medal in the other. Below it, 3 words, "Strength in stillness." The war had ended. But the mission never did. In the quiet that followed the final credits of The Weight We Carry, something lingered. It wasn't just the sound of a theme song fading or the echo of applause from those who had witnessed Raina Jefferson's story. It was the weight of recognition. Recognition that strength doesn't always come with noise. That some battles are fought long after the gunfire has ceased. And not in deserts or jungles, but in diners, courtrooms, sidewalks, and the silent corners of our own conscience. Raina Jefferson never set out to be a hero. She didn't chase headlines or medals. Her scars weren't invitations for sympathy. They were evidence of survival, of service, of sacrifice. But when the world mocked her, tried to reduce her story to a punchline or a stereotype, she didn't respond with anger or vengeance. She responded with precision. Like a soldier, she memorized faces, names, words, and when the time was right, she moved, not to destroy, but to expose, to restore, to remind. At Ours Channel, we believe the greatest stories aren't always the loudest. They are the ones hidden in plain sight, stories of dignity reclaimed, of silence broken with grace, of scars worn like medals, not for what was endured, but for what was overcome. Raina's journey didn't end with a courtroom victory or a viral video. It began there. Because the real story wasn't about one waitress. It was about all of us, about the assumptions we carry, the stories we ignore, the people we dismiss because they don't fit our idea of who deserves respect, and about the moment when one person refuses to remain invisible and everything changes. What if we chose to listen more closely? What if we saw each scar not as shame but as a testament? What if we understood that behind every silent worker, every person we overlook, there might be a universe of resilience waiting to be recognized? What if we measured greatness not by titles, but by how someone treats others when no one is watching? Raina's story may have concluded in our series, but its echoes ripple outward. They show up in the veterans who now speak freely about their pain, in the teenage girl who stopped hiding her own scars, in the executives rewriting their hiring policies, in the classrooms where scars and stories play, and in every quiet diner where someone chooses to see, really see, the person standing before them. At the very end of the final episode, there's a frame most people miss. A still shot of Ray's diner after closing. The lights are dim, the chairs are stacked, but one figure remains behind the counter, Raina, drying a single coffee cup, not posing, not preaching, just being, as if to say, the story isn't over, the work goes on, and so does she. To every viewer who's watched this series from beginning to end, thank you. You've seen what justice in motion looks like. You've witnessed how one woman used truth as her compass, empathy as her weapon, and quiet resilience as her legacy. But this isn't just a story to admire, it's a story to carry into your workplace, into your schools, into your dinner tables and daily choices, because Raina's strength belongs not just to her, but to all of us. If we're brave enough to claim it, we tell stories that reclaim dignity, that challenges assumptions, that reveals what courage really looks like in everyday clothes. If this journey moved you, let us know in the comments below where you're watching from. Share your thoughts, share your story, and if you believe in the power of one voice, one act, one scar turned into strength, then please like and subscribe. Join us, because the next story might be yours, and it deserves to be told.